Okay, so this is question 21 of the test for review. First, what we're going to do is check off the conditions. And so because of genetics, because it has 13 fathers who have adult male children, so we're talking about fathers and their sons. We're not doing a randomly selected group of fathers and a randomly selected group of sons, but we're doing a randomly selected group of fathers who have sons. So because of that, it is dependent. A way you can tell whether it's independent or dependent is, does the selection of the first group affect the selection of the second group? So in this case, we'll only test the sons if we pick their fathers. Or in another question, it talks about water clarity, and you take it on the same dates. And the reason why we did on this date in the second sample is because we did on the same date in the first sample. So that can kind of help you out. So it's dependent. And we asked 13 fathers who have adult male children. 13 is less than 30, and that is the set standard for how big your sample size has to be without having it be normally distributed. So this one right here is what we're going to select. And the sample size is no more than 5% of the population. It's not an independent sample. We're talking about dependent. And we already said that the sample size either has to be large or the differences are normally distributed. So not that one either. Okay, so we're talking about the difference between xi and xy. So xi in this case represents the fathers. So our null is always going to be equal to 0. So that's saying the children, the sons, are the same height as the fathers, because if you minus 6 feet from 6 feet, you get 0. Now what we're trying to tell, the belief that sons are taller than their fathers. So if we write out so we're talking about xi minus yi, okay? And so we think that the sons are taller. So this one right here would be taller. So let's go back to, let's say the fathers are 5.5 feet, okay? Minus 6 feet, that's going to equal negative 0.5. So it's going to be less than 0. If you're ever unsure what to do with these type of problems, because it's a little bit tricky, especially because this happens when the second sample is bigger than the first sample, because you're thinking, oh, taller, that's greater than, but no, it's not. We're saying if the sons are taller, then it's less than 0. So now we're going to calculate the test statistic. So what we're going to do with that is let me see if it gives you, it doesn't specifically say mean, but that's what we're talking about because I don't know, that's just how it is. If you go to stats and you look at the things that we're talking about, proportion stats and t-stats are really the ones that we're talking about in 10 and 11. Proportion stats doesn't have an option for paired, but t-stats does. So can't go wrong with that. Oh, I forgot to transfer the data. Whenever you're talking about paired data, they're going to give you data. So stat, t-stats, paired. Sample 1 is the height of father, just like how we did this. And sample 2 is son. I'm going to click Save Differences. That's always a good option to do. And then we got to make this less than 0, just like how we put right there. So the test statistic is the t-stat, so 0.01 in this case. P-value is p-value 0.504. Should it be rejected? Okay, so this is when we're talking about this. So we have our p-value at 0.504, and our alpha, or our level of significance, is right there, 0.05, and this is definitely greater than. So because that's greater than, we're gonna fail to reject. Do not reject, because the p-value is greater than the level of significance. There, I was explaining this to someone else earlier today, how to remember if there is sufficient evidence or is not sufficient evidence and when to use that. A way that I like to remember it is you kind of have to think of it separately. You look at the p-value and you decide whether or not to reject the null. And then once you have that answer, then you think of how, sorry, I just lost the word I wanted to say, how, like official, I'm not quite sure. I can't remember that word all of a sudden, I'm sorry guys. But when we say do not reject, there's a reason why we don't say accept the null. It's because we don't have enough data to say to reject it. But when we say reject the null, that's very official, very confident. That's the word I wanted to use. If you're rejecting something, you're confident that you don't want it. But if you're just like, I'm not going to reject it, I'm going to keep my options open, it's because there's not sufficient evidence. So hopefully that can help you guys. And then we're testing that the sons are taller than their fathers. Let me know if you have any questions about any of this, or if explaining how to decide when to reject and the sufficient evidence, if that's not clicking with you, please let me know. Yeah.